Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way.
I actually, what did you think of this trailer? I actually really liked it, the Dragon Tattoo trailer. I think it sold the movie, maybe not in the most complete way. It's a big movie with a lot of rough edges, but it sold the intent of the movie. I think it sold the spirit of the movie well. What'd you think?
Oh, I definitely think so, especially considering that Lisbeth Salander is such a critical part of the story, and the trailer really sets her up first so that we know this is really going to be the kind of the tale of Lisbeth Salander before we jump into setting up the mystery. And I thought that was a really smart way to kind of set this up because, she is such a key element to making this trilogy work. It's like Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs. Her
Great
character
comparison.
Carries so much weight that it is to me, she is the critical element of making the story work. And when you see Noomie working as Lisbeth in this trailer, I see exactly kind of the vision of the book brought to life. So for me, it worked really well. And even the American trailer also did that well. I think both trailers really captured the essence of Lisbeth Salander and then the mystery. So I think that this was a for a very big, complicated story, I think both trailers were actually cut together really nicely.
I do too. And I think, the benefit that they have for the trailer in particular is that there's just no way to actually give away anything meaningful in the story.
Right, yeah.
It's impossible to do that because this entire movie is context. Like, without the benefit of the narrative thread, you're not going to understand, no matter what they show you, what little flashes of imagery they show you, what little bits of intrigue or slices of body, you're not going to understand, what's going on there. And I think that makes it very satisfying and intriguing. That is the benefit of cutting a trailer for a thriller film. I think in large part they get away with a lot, and but this is a film that I think does it very, very well. Do you want to talk a little bit about the title?
I mean, the title of the film as it was released in Sweden and the book is actually Men Who Hate Women. And I found it interesting that that whatever point that was, I don't know if it was when they brought it over or translated it into English that the title became The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And hence the rest of the titles subsequently, or maybe it became that after the second book, which was The Girl Who Played with Fire, because that, I think, might be the kind of the key title where it's pretty much the same in both languages, The Girl Who Played with Fire, because by the time you get to the third book, I think that the Swedish title for the third book, here it is, the Air Castle That Was Blown Up. That's the literal translation of the Swedish title. And I think it just is one of those titles where it's, it's probably a phrase in Swedish that might translate better than it does. And then, so I think what they did is they said, okay, when we translate this to English, we'll stick with the Girl Who, kind of formula that started with The Girl Who Played with Fire. And then we'll go to, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and kind of create it from there, because even the books, as they've continued after, Stieg Larsson had a number of them outlined, and somebody else has come in to continue writing them. And now there's the Girl in the Spider's Web and The Girl Who Takes an Eye for an Eye. Yeah. By David Lagerkrantz. Right. So those books are out there, and, but it's all part of this Millennium series that really focus on this investigative journalist, Mikael Blomqvist, who is the publisher of this magazine, Millennium. And unrelated to our conversation entirely, I love the Swedish book covers, because they all look like the cover of the Millennium magazines, which looks just like a magazine with totally exactly what you'd see. Yeah. So I think that they've now latched on to that. I just, the title Men Who Hate Women, it's an interesting title. I don't find it as catchy for a film. Like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is a really visual title. Men Who Hate Women sounds like, an article somebody writes for their dissertation or something like that. It doesn't quite have as much of a ring to it. Although in context of kind of that Millennium, magazine cover for the book, where it's Millennium, and then it's like an article is called Men Who Hate Women, and that's almost how it's set up. It makes sense in that context. But for the film, I think this is really a much stronger title, even if it doesn't tie into the overall story at all.
Yeah, it fits Stieg Larsson, he, as a Swedish journalist. Like, he's writing it from an astute professional perspective, and it makes sense that it would feel very natural to his ear. I think narratively it's really interesting, though, and I think it does make a difference in how you look at the major characters in the movie. Men Who Hate Women is a story about the violence that men do against women. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is an origin story of an avenging feminist angel, and that is a very different setup, right? It is the story about the girl and what she does to these men who have wronged her in her life, and Men Who Hate Women is a story of the men doing the wrongs. And I think that's really important. And I think as a journalist, Stieg Larsson is telling the first story as a narrative that we get a lot of energy out of, and we are moved by The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and that naming schema that they as you say latched onto makes a big difference, and it's much more satisfying.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
Man, that was heavy.
Men jag måste nog varna dig att Lisbeth är en lite speciell flicka. Men missbedöm henne inte. Hon är vår absolut bästa researcher. Vad kan du berätta för mig om Blomqvist?
Mikael Blomqvist, även känd som Kalle Blomqvist. Ett smeknamn han fick efter att ha klarat upp några bankrån på 80-talet. Sen dess har han varit en offentlig person utan någon större hemlighet.
Ja, du känner inte min familj. Du vet inte vad de är i stånd till. En av de där personerna tog livet av vargen.
This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, we're kicking off our series on the Swedish Millennium series with the Niels Arden Oplev's introduction to the wonderful Lisbeth Salander in 2009's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel.
And if you enjoy this show and are interested in supporting our ongoing work investigating great films, please consider a regular donation through our Patreon page. You'll get to join our back channel conversations on Slack, listen to the members-only weekend show, and get better chances of being part of our Listener's Choice episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/thenextreel.
Du gör bara ont värre genom att komma hit med din lilla hora.
Vilka är misstänkta? Ingen. Alla.
This movie was tougher than I remembered, and I feel like I'm a little bit of a deficit because I don't remember the original film, and the extended edition I think adds some things that make the whole thing a little bit rough around the edges. But man, I still really enjoy it.
Well, and that's, I think, something that we definitely will need to talk about, because you watched the extended version, which basically is the 3-hour version that is the kind of the 2 90-minute TV episodes, essentially. I watched the theatrical version, which was the 2.5 hour. It's still very long, but I lose a half hour. And my understanding is that there's actually more of, I'm speaking of, the title that we were just talking about, the Men Who Hate Women, the theatrical version, Mikael Blomqvist very much is a good man. And my understanding in the extended edition is that he's not necessarily a man who hates women, but he certainly is maybe a little more, I don't even know if womanizing is right, but it certainly seems like there's more women in his life in the version that you watched.
In the theatrical, does he actually have sex with his partner at Millennium?
No.
Yeah, they do. There is a sex scene between him and his partner there. So Erica. Yeah, it cements their relationship. Very clearly. Tell you what it does. It's really interesting. It makes, when Lisbeth, makes her move on him in the middle of the night that night, it makes it much more awkward because you know that he is in a relationship with this other woman, and that relationship comes back around. So he's actually effectively having an affair with Lisbeth, on Erica, and that makes it a little bit more hurtful, I think, and a little bit more powerful. So that was a piece I actually liked.
Well, and that's something that they returned to in the David Fincher remake, where Lisbeth goes off on her journey, I guess, to frame Venestrom, and she goes to the islands and she's got her blonde wig and all that sort of stuff, and she comes back and having freed Blomqvist from this whole debacle that he had been in with Venestrom. She buys him that leather jacket and, really nice. And she goes to give it to him, and she goes to Millennium, and she pulls up and she sees Mikael leaving arm in arm with Erica. Now, I don't know if that's something that is brought back, because that was a great ending in that version. And see, I love that, because the theatrical version ends with her in her blonde wig, just kind of like walking away down the beach in the Cayman Islands. And it's like, that's, okay, so she succeeded, but it was really not, for me, it took some of the power out of it.
Yeah, and this one, it does come back to that. There is the scene where it's much closer. If I remember in the Fincher version, she's kind of down a level and they're kind of farther away, and it's at night and it's a little harder to see. In this one, you wonder how they didn't see each other. She's like right across the street as they come out of this this little shop or out of Millennium. They're in the Millennium offices and she's waiting outside, and they miss her and they walk off arm in arm and she's very upset. And then and we do end in that same way. She's walking down the beach with the wig, and that's just her sort of moving on with her life. But I did like that. The other thing I liked about the extended edition is that Jana is outed as the spy for Wennerstrom, and
oh sure.
I think that was an important piece. We see I don't remember how much we see of him as the insider in Millennium, but in this one we have him. He's found out that he's been getting copies of every email sent routed through his computer, and that he's forwarding all these emails to Wennerstrom's people. And they discover it. They decide that they're going to use him and start planning information so that he sends false information to Wennerstrom's people. At the end, they bring down Wennerstrom, and he is brought into Erica's office and terminated. That I thought was an interesting little piece. It was just enough of an insert story, like it's like an F story at this point, given how complex this thing is. But I liked it that it still felt sort of well-rounded. That we got to see this guy come from member of the team to disgraced former employee. In the course of those 3 hours.
And none of that is in the theatrical cut.
Yeah.
It's completely non-existent. So, yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where, as you trim time, obviously those F stories, as you call it, do end up falling by the wayside. Mm-hmm. It was still a satisfying watch for me. I didn't necessarily need it to be there. But in context of, getting everything I can out of that novel and getting it up onto the screen, there is kind of that desire to kind of still have it in there.
There are still pieces, though, Andy, that I thought were interesting. Now, you've read the book too, right? Have you done the book?
I did. I read the books before I watched the original trilogy back when they were in theaters.
Yeah.
And I haven't read them since.
11 years ago now or something like that, right? I mean,
it wasn't quite that. No, it was right before. So these came out in the US in 2010. So it was probably 2010.
Okay. One of the, and it's been probably that long for me too. I mean, if 7-8 years, right? So, my memory of the books is a little bit iffy, but one of the things I remember from the book is that the relationships between Mikhail and the family were more well-rounded. Like they were weirder. There was more depth to them. I know he had.
When you say the family, are you talking about his personal family?
No, the Wenger.
Oh, okay.
Family.
Oh, the Wenger. Okay, right.
Yeah. Although I know we had more of a relationship between him and his sister in the book as well. That was something I remember. I was glad she was even in the movie, but I think she was more of a character in the book, if I recall. But we got to know the Wenger family on Hedestad, at greater depth, and that is a piece of the movie that I think is it's a little bit empty. Like I felt empty with those relationships between Mikhail and the people that he was researching, the extended families. He was learning more about them. This felt, I guess, the closest parallel I could have to it is how I felt with the second act of Murder on the Orient Express. Right? It was just fast, and it left me wanting a little bit more. So they added some of these relationships, like Jana at Millennium, at the expense of beefing up some of the other relationships with the family on Hedestad. And I think that was an interesting way or an interesting choice, and I think a limited choice in finding a greater affinity to the novel, to the source material. And so personally, I felt a little bit jaded about that. And it also made the overall storytelling just a little rough, like perforated over the course of the 3 hours.
Let's see, I can't remember how much of the family we get in the book, but certainly the theatrical cut, it's not a lot. I mean, primarily it's Henrik before he goes into the hospital. Mm-hmm. It's Martin who kind of becomes the confidant,
right.
And then the obviously the antagonist. And a little bit of is it Cecilia? I think is the one that he kind of they befriend, and then she's kind of interested in him. Other than that, you get kind of the scene when everybody is together while Henrik's in the hospital, and they want him out, and that's kind of the one big moment until until he breaks into Harold's place.
Right.
There's just not much, and you're right, for a story where it's like you're doing this kind of, as they say, kind of that closed room mystery story. You do want to get a little bit more of the people who are kind of considered the suspects, other than through kind of the flashbacks that we get and looking at the photos of them. Well,
and speaking of looking at the photos, you have to, I think, pull apart a little bit how Oplev as a director and, as the team puts together a film that spends so much time trying to make research sexy. The number of times we watch him scanning photos and scrolling through iPhoto and, sending email to kind of dramatic, dance music. Does that work for you?
Well, that's it works in context of just getting the story onto the celluloid and getting it out there. But it isn't as good as it is in Fincher's version. And I think, this is an interesting point to kind of bring that version in a little more, because I actually watched them back to back. And I have to say, Fincher is just such an exceptional director that he makes all of that stuff just so interesting to look at. I don't think that Niels Arden Oplev has the same strengths in that capacity that Fincher does. And to that end, I felt the film a little lacking in kind of that cinematic storytelling. Like, it was just dissolve across a screen of email and then dissolve. Like, you have kind of multiple dissolves of different things as they're kind of coming across the screen. And it's just like, okay, that's great. It's average, I guess. That being said, I still prefer this version to the Fincher version. As much as I love Fincher as a director, it's just, there are things like that just come across as, it's storytelling we have to get across, and they just didn't come up with a better way to do it.
See, I actually, it works for me, and correct me on this, because I'm sure I'm going to start lying. I just don't remember. I don't remember these sequences as clearly as I should in the Fincher version. But in this version, the thing that I like the most is that it is very pedestrian technology, right? It's just the stuff that you go out and that comes with the computer. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't invest in fancy graphics. They didn't, developing any sort of, fancy art for the screens. They didn't invest in some, fancy non-existent technology that's going to help analyze photos. Right? There's a lot of waiting. There's a lot of scanning and taping. There are conversations with him and his graphic designer at Millennium where the graphic designer says, "Man, it's too blurry. What you are asking cannot be done." Like, that's a really rewarding, conversation in, when we're just, drowning in movies where technology can do the impossible thing. And I think this movie is a real celebration of just, shoe leather. Right? Just straight up doing the work. And we spend enough time staring at that little picture of the blurry guy in the blue sweater that by the time he figures out who the blurry guy in the blue sweater is, or when Lisbeth figures that out, that becomes a shocking reveal and an exciting reveal and a rewarding reveal. And I think that was handled really very well here.
To me, it works in context of the story, but it's, I guess what I'm saying is, it's just a little more interesting to look at when Fincher handles it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Can we talk a little bit about the sexual violence? This is a hard movie to watch.
It is, and I think that it's something that Stieg Larsson was kind of dealing with when he was telling this story, is just this idea of violence, and especially as it relates to women in particular. This woman, Lisbeth Salander, and but how she never allows herself to become just a victim. You know, she uses her strength to kind of find her way through it, whether it's in the brief flashbacks we have of kind of setting her father on fire, or whether it's getting back at Niels Bjurman, it's her legal guardian. Yeah. It's some pretty horrific stuff that she ends up having to go through. And it's very difficult to watch the scenes, but what I do appreciate about it is that you see Lisbeth find a way to not allow herself to be left as a victim. And what's great about this story, and having Lisbeth in it, partnering up with Mikhail to solve this 40-year-old mystery of this missing girl, is that she is not allowing Harriet to be a victim. And what's great about the story of Harriet is Harriet was in the same place as Lisbeth was. And she also did not allow herself to be a victim. I mean, she had been a victim to her father. Then she took matters into her own hands. Then she was a victim of her brother. And she, again, took matters into her own hands. And yes, that meant she had to pretend that she was dead or had disappeared until Mikhail figured it all out. But these are stories of women who are put into horrific situations and have the strength to find a way through it. And so I do feel, as difficult as it is to watch, there is power to what these women do.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think, particularly Lisbeth's case, I think the comparison to her as a superhero, origin story is to her story as a superhero origin story it's one that really sticks with me. She ends up using her tools to inflict great, essentially violence on the men that have wronged her, and she's physically violent to the men who jump her in the subway. She uses a sort of psychological or technological violence to break into Mikhail's deepest secrets, and she does it for hire because of just you get the sense that it's just sort of a generalized disrespect, but ends up trying to right that wrong over the course of the movie. She uses again great physical violence against Niels Bjurman. It is dramatic, and yet, as stomach churning of a sequence as it is, it comes off as remarkably rewarding to watch her take back that power. I found her really great, and this is one of those Fincher versus Oplev pieces. I vastly prefer Noomie Rapace's performance here, and I wish so much that she had played Salander in Fincher's version.
Well, I mean, she is really the reason to watch these movies. I mean, she really just blows up the screen. She's just mesmerizing in every way. I also, jumping back to what you had been saying just before that, though, I also think it's really interesting and powerful to see the scene at the end when she's watching Martin die after Martin kind of crashes. And here you have this horrific man who had just, as he just was talking to Mikhail, who he was about to kill, he was talking about how fascinating it is to watch these people die and see them, that look in their eye when they give up, realizing that, there's no way out. It's just awful. Like, hearing him say stuff like that, it's just disgusting, and it's frightening.
Yeah.
And then at the end, he's trapped in the car now, and he sees her legs standing there as she watches him, and then the car ignites and everything, and she watches him, and it's just this really interesting kind of flip flop of her now kind of in his shoes. And what I really like about the scene, the way it plays out here, is which it doesn't play out this way in the Fincher version, where Mikhail actually thinks that she killed him. He's kind of like, "What did you do? Did you kill him?" And she's just like, "No, but he died." And it's almost like he's not sure. It's like, okay, but what does that mean? And then, I found that really interesting psychological kind of exploration between the two of them as it kind of dealt with all of that.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. The way I read it was that he knew that, my impression was that he believed what she was saying and that he was deeply conflicted about whether or not that was an act of murder, right? That her not doing something was, when she says he burned to death, could you have saved him? Or is that not in the original? Because they have that conversation, right?
It is, but I guess I just meant initially when she first comes back and and he's asking her and she's like, he's dead. And his initial reaction is she just killed him.
Yeah.
It's like you can see his subtext as he's talking and everything, thinking that, oh my God, this woman she killed this guy. Like, I don't know if that was right. I mean, he's a terrible guy, but I'm not sure that was right. And then, yes, as the conversation goes, he burned to death. Could you have saved him?
Yeah.
Yes. All of that is there. And the conflict within him is still there. But I love how initially it's like this doubt that he has of her as a person, that this is this woman who ostensibly just killed somebody.
Yeah. Right.
Something else about her character that I think is so interesting is that the way that Noomie plays Lisbeth, it's amazing how she is so tough. She is so much like this raging animal on the outside, but we get moments throughout where you can see right through her, and it's powerful, where you can see this fragile little girl kind of buried underneath that very rough, very mean facade that she has. And I love that about her. I think that makes her character so interesting to look at. And then you have these moments like where she toward the end of the film where she goes and meets with her mom, and which is a nice setup for what we're going to be getting in parts 2 and 3, which is probably why they left the whole bit with the mom out of the American version.
Right.
But it adds to that element that we get of her. And it's really, again, going back to her as this character that makes this film so interesting. I think that it's critical. And just as an interesting side note, Noomie's real mother played her mom in that little bit.
Oh, that's cool. That's very sweet.
Yes, it is.
It's interesting. Before we move into our deep scene dive, which I'm excited to do, Andy, there is this is an interesting parallel, and I think that you noted in our notes here about the love story and the crime story that are sort of interleaved over the narrative of the film.
I found such a strength in watching that in this as the film played out. The way that we get kind of the balance between these characters, Mikhail and Lisbeth, and their story, paired with this mystery that they're solving. And it made me think right back to the Ricardo Darín film that we just watched, The Secret in Their Eyes, which also had a brilliant blending of those two stories, which made that film work so incredibly well. And, it's a small comparison, but I definitely think it's one worth noting in this particular film, because it is something that makes this film, I think, stand out above probably a lot of just kind of what you would see as the kind of the standard closed room mysteries.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's a fantastic parallel, and it just it's one of those things. These movies cement each other's success for me, just in terms of the structure. And speaking of structure, this has a film told in maybe 16 acts.
It's very Return of the King-esque, right? It's right. It's just, you've got this little story, and then you got that story, and here's this ending, and that ending, and this ending, and that ending. It's kind of all over the place. It really feels very novelistic. It doesn't really have a good sense of the kind of a 3-act structure.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a problem, but the film is a success regardless of how you look at it. But in the sense of cinematic kind of story structure, it doesn't really fit.
No, not so much. Let's do the deep scene dive, Andy.
Let's do it.
The scene that we are talking about here, the scene that we think really is representative of the tone of the film that doesn't involve sexual violence, is the scene where Mikhail and Lisbeth meet face to face for the very first time.
It's a wonderful little scene that takes place, at least in my version, it's an hour and 11 minutes into the film. After we get, Mikhail has already been doing his investigation, and he gets this clue from Wasp about these biblical references for these women, and he's able to, from that, piece together kind of who they are and how they died. And then he talks to Henrik's lawyer, Frode, and is asking about this. And he's like, yeah, I might have an idea how that happened. And cut to, here we are in our scene where we have Lisbeth asleep in bed. The door, somebody knocks at the door. It's Mikhail, and he's here to talk to her.
I love this sequence, and in my version, it is my version, the version I recut for American audiences. It happens at about the 86-minute mark. It is the cliffhanger scene at the end of part 1 of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So at the end of this scene, it cuts to closing credits and end music, and then the whole thing starts again right in the middle of the release. And in fact, we didn't mention this, but Netflix has the entire Dragon Trilogy. They're calling it the Dragon Trilogy. It is essentially the TV series in 6 parts, and so you can watch it streaming right now, and you'll see what I mean. It's a very strange and jarring thing if you're used to the theatrical release, because the movie just is over. It's over at an hour and a half, and you're ready to start the new thing, and it ends on this scene. So that's an aside. What I love about this scene is just how pragmatic both of these characters are, right? I mean, it feels like, as much as this is a dance between these two characters, both of them have very clear intentions. He wants to solve this for his reasons because he's been hired to do it, and he's becoming obsessed with this case, and he believes there's a case there. She wants to do it because she believes that he has been that Blomkvist was set up, and that she's trying to make good on her relationship with him. You can tell that she's, or at least I read into that she has some underlying sort of seething guilt that she is trying to satiate, that she believes he is a better person than he was set up to be, and that a 40-year-old murder of a young girl is checks all the boxes for her, and you can see all of this played out in a very tight space of her apartment.
Yeah, and it's not overly complex as far as how it's put together. I would say it's actually fairly simple. It starts off in her bedroom in a kind of a single of her sleeping. It kind of comes down from the curtains to her. We see her sleeping, then all of a sudden you hear the knocking, and she gets up, and then behind her we see this other woman sleeping in bed with her. And then she gets dressed, she goes to the door. And then now we're at our next location, which is the front door. And then it's really kind of a back and forth as she and Mikhail have this conversation before she lets him in. And then he comes in, and after a brief little bit right there by the door of the three of them, they go into the kitchen, and he and she have this final conversation, I should say, about this case that he knows, she knows that he's working on. And he asks her at that point, saying, I need your help. Like so many people in her life, he's not here to, for legal reasons, he's not here to get her arrested or anything like that. He has stepped aside and gotten past all that stuff of her abusing her abilities by continuing to spy on him and what he's up to. He's gotten past all that and said, this is a person who can help me, and I am going to accept that help, or I'm going to ask for it and see if she will, be a partner with me in this. I think that's great. I love the way that scene plays out. I think it's really nice. I think there's also a small little bit, kind of that little comedy bit about the coffee, which I think is just also kind of helps break the ice a little bit. But I think all in all, it's a really interesting scene because largely Lisbeth doesn't have much to do in it other than kind of she puts up her barriers and she's like, why are you here? What are you here for? What do you want? Which I think is great. And we don't even get her answer at the end of the scene. He just says, I need your help. I want you to come and help me figure this out. And you just get this shot of her face as she's looking kind of everything is rattling through her brains as she's trying to figure out what to do. And then in the theatrical cut, all of a sudden you get a hint of Jacob Groth's music slowly starting to build as we then cut to her on the motorbike, a kind of establishing shot of her riding down the country road as she's heading up to Hedestad. And I think that's a really great way to kind of move us into this partnership.
I do too. And Eric Kress is the man behind the camera. And I found it really interesting. It's hard to compare generally to Fincher. But I couldn't help it in this sequence in particular, because this sequence is also terrific in the Fincher version. The framing, even though Fincher moves his camera a lot in a lot of very small and subtle ways, the camera is always moving in some little bit around character close-ups. In this case, the framings of faces, I couldn't help but think this feels very Fincher to me. The way we open on her, her sideways, she's laying down in bed and her eyes open and she gets up, and we, focus on the woman that's in bed with her. The way we kind of alternate between character faces, even though the camera isn't moving all that much in this version, it still feels very centered on character, which I think it does such great service to the motivations and intentions that these two actors are trying to convey. It just works so well for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. I mean, this film is interesting as we go through it. There are times when Kress has a lot of camera movement going on throughout, particularly as Blomkvist is digging into the investigations and he's up on Hedestad. But moments like this, where it's really character, the camera all of a sudden really settles down and focuses on them and allows them to kind of do their stuff. It does that several times throughout the film, which is really great. And in this particular case, it works really nicely. And even when it's just simple, back and forth shot, reverse shot, as we have Mikhail on one side of the door and her on the other side with the chain between them, it's just nicely framed, and it works well in context of that barrier that is between these two characters as he's trying to bring her into his world officially, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I think so too. I love the production design. Niels Sager. That's wrong.
Sounds good to me. I have no idea. Yeah.
Delightful. Production design is terrific. The apartment feels very much like someplace Lisbeth would live. It is run down and it is abused. And the coffee, you can just feel it. It's probably 3 days old, but my goodness, I just love being in that apartment. It feels like my first apartment. What's funny is you were in my first apartment.
It did look just like this.
It was yellower.
That, and then I think that I don't know how much I have to say about the costumes in this particular scene, but is it Silla Rorby? The costumes, notably Lisbeth's costumes, I think are just really strong in this. I think everything that they do with the hair makeup, the costumes, everything that Noomie is bringing to the table really make Lisbeth a strong character. And actually, that's something interesting in this scene is, you see Lisbeth, she's completely naked in bed with her girlfriend. Man, is she buff. I mean, it's you get this real sense that this is this woman who being this girly girl is not what she's about. She's just a tough woman. And I mean, Noomie spent 7 months training to get herself transformed into Lisbeth, not just with that, but just kind of all aspects of it. And I think it really shows.
Oh my goodness. That actually gets to, I think, one of the most interesting and subtle to me disappointments of the film. And I have to compare it to Red Dragon. When we're talking about Red Dragon, we get some of the most beautiful hero shots of the dragon tattoo in the film. And in this one, all I wanted was to see more of that amazing dragon tattoo, but we never get a really satisfying hero shot of the tattoo. It is all left to these subtleties or, these kind of distant, longer shots or medium shots and that don't actually linger on the artwork. And that's what I wanted, that's what I wanted the most. It's interesting. There is a sequence in the release that I watched where we see her get a tattoo. Was there one in the theatrical release where she goes, it's after her first encounter with her
Niels,
guardian?
Yeah, because that's where she kind of gets I don't know if it's where she gets the idea or where she's kind of exploring the right way to kind of like buying this tool to use to get back at him.
To get the largest needle that's available. Yeah. I thought that was a great scene. Right. Anyway, so I could have used more tattoo and this would have been the scene to do it, because she is, as you say, she's naked. And when she gets out of bed, that her back is snakes under a blanket of muscle. It is just amazing power, and it's an incredible demonstration of physique.
She did, and it's an interesting. We'll probably talk. We'll be talking about Noomie for a bit with this series, but I mean, she worked on this whole trilogy for a year and a half. She said that this character Lisbeth got into her head so much that when she was done, she had to throw up. She immediately had to just go and just throw up a bunch. And she kind of saw this as her body finding a way to kind of purge the character and everything that it had kind of brought into her. I found that so interesting that it basically was this physical manifestation of the character that she had to find a way to expunge.
Oh my goodness. I can't even imagine being in somebody else's head quite so long.
Yeah, right. Especially a dark character like this.
Yeah.
And I guess, we should also just mention that Noomie, while largely she brought Lisbeth to life from within her and from what Larsson had written on the page, but she did also mention that the characters in Nikita and True Romance were also some character inspirations that she had.
Did you see a parallel between those characters?
I think it's an interesting pairing of those two characters. I think that I do see maybe what she was pulling from. There's definitely strong characters. They're very interesting female characters that definitely have their own strengths in the world of violence, and so I can see how those might have been draws for her.
It's funny. I didn't. Those two didn't come up for me, but the one character that I kept thinking, or at least I should say, the one strong, sort of crazed woman in film, and we've talked about her is Franca Potente in Run Lola Run, which she's the parallel for me to obviously less violent, but certainly given to doing whatever it takes to make the world right. I saw the parallel just in the physicality and the strength that they bring to the roles. I thought it was really interesting.
We talked a lot about Noomie. We should also just mention Michael Nyqvist as Mikael Blomkvist, who's I think he works really well as this character, and it's just so sad. After this trilogy, he really kind of blossomed, and I shouldn't say blossomed. I mean, he had been acting for decades, but I think he really started expanding into the international world, and certainly we saw a lot more of him in U.S. films. And it's just so sad that he passed away, I think, just back in April.
Very sad. Just watched him again as Viggo Tarasov in John Wick.
Good stuff.
Wick. Such good stuff. Music, Jacob Groth, you already mentioned the music in the film. You a fan?
I like it. It's not anything that blows me away, but I think it works in context of the film. Between the two, I think this has a little bit more of a theme that I do kind of like. But I do think there's something about the atmospherics brought by the guys behind the Fincher version. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I guess I can say I don't love any of their music, but I find all of it interesting in different ways.
Well, I'm with you. I feel like I can't love this music because the music of the Fincher version is so deeply in my brain. It is a a truly exceptional score for that film. Forgot to mention Anne Ostrud is behind the editing of the film.
I actually, weirdly, I wrote down in my notes that considering it was 2.5 hours, I wrote, wow, weirdly, it feels kind of rushed sometimes. And I was like, I don't know why that is. I think that there's just so much story that they're trying to get across. Maybe it doesn't feel that way in the 3-hour version.
No, it definitely feels. It definitely feels that way. That's one of the things I noticed is that it's sort of relentless. Even at 3 hours, it feels like they are jamming an enormous amount of story in a very small bottle.
It's very interesting how they do that. And again, going back to the Fincher version, I remember that in both cases, in both films, we have scenes that are very short where we'll just get something. Really, they kind of go back to that rule of screenwriting, get in late, do what you need to do and get out early. And they do that very successfully in both versions just to kind of keep things moving because of the fact that they just have so much story to tell.
It's a really interesting point that you bring that up because I found myself thinking about that, particularly around Ingvar Hurdwell, who played Dirk Frode. And I'm sure I butchered all 4 of those words. There's a sequence in the hospital where Mikhail goes to talk to him about the fact that Heinrich has, he's had his heart attack and he's in the hospital. And it's when Frode is about to tell him, I think I know who might be behind it. And he takes forever to get the words out of his mouth. It feels like, I know it's just a couple of seconds, but it feels like, man, the whole movie goes into slow motion because Frode forgets how to move his mouth. And I thought, wow, that is remarkable that they allowed this to play in a movie that otherwise is pretty relentless in cutting. Like there's just a lot of airspace in between their lines.
Yeah, that's again. It's just it's interesting the pacing, but I do like that though because it allows for that roller coaster ride. You want to have those faster moments and there's slower moments. So I feel all in all watching it, I never felt bored. The film moves at a great pace, and at 2.5 hours, I was in it the whole time.
Yeah, I was too. You want to talk about the script? Nicolaj Arcel and Rasmus Heisterberg did the adaptation.
They took a beefy novel that was rather, I don't know if complex is the right word, but just had a lot of details in it. And they found a way to blend all of it. Were there elements that were in the book that I felt were missing? Sure. Maybe they are in the extended version, but on the whole, I think that they deliver in giving us this full rounded story here.
Niels Arden Oplev, the director, do you feel like you have a sense for what he is able to do? Does he have a style?
I don't know. I'm not sure if I've seen much else of his cinematically, other than, because I know he's done a lot of TV stuff, but I think for films, I don't think I've seen anything else that he has done. So I don't know if I have a good handle on his style. What I do feel watching this compared to the Fincher version is that he doesn't have the I don't know if prowess is the right word, or just he's not as adept at his tools with cinematic storytelling that as Fincher is. But I think he is still versatile at telling a good story.
So he did, after this, he did Dead Man Down.
I remember talking about the trailer, but I never watched it.
Right. Which I unfortunately saw it and I don't remember it very well. What I do remember, interestingly, is the episode 1 of Mr. Robot that he did, which I thought was fantastic. Episode Hello Friend. He then went and did well, it was actually immediately before that, he did the pilot for Under the Dome, the Stephen King adaptation. He did the pilot for Midnight Texas series. He did the pilot for Game of Silence. He did the pilot for Unforgettable. This was, and a couple of episodes. This was actually the first one that he did after Millennium in 2011. He sort of made several years of his career around pilots or episode 1s. And they were kind of a mixed bag. I have not seen the Unforgettable episodes, so I haven't seen those. But the others, Mr. Robot is definitely the highlight, and that is, on the strength of a terrific concept and an outstanding script. So I don't know how much of that is his, but it is a delightful bit of entertainment. And then he goes on to Flatliner 17, Andy.
Oh, what a shame.
Right?
I didn't see it, so I can't. It's not fair of me to judge, but just based on the trailer and what I had heard, I just feel disappointed that that's what he ended up doing.
Exactly, that's exactly where I am. Yeah. It didn't break the 6 stars on IMDb as worth rolling the dice on. And man, have I heard some scathing things about this movie, and not just Amazon review scathing. These are legit scathing things about this movie.
Although it does make me wonder if maybe that's why some of the actors signed on to be a part of that remake, just because of the fact that he was actually directing it.
Anybody else in the cast or crew that you are interested in talking about?
Not really, other than I did want to just point out, since we did talk about Kingsman, The Golden Circle, the fact that Lina Endre, who plays Erica Berger, she is the Queen of Sweden in that film. So there you go.
I had not made that comparison at all, or that parallel at all. That's fantastic. She does not look the same to me. Not even a little bit.
Oh, very funny.
Oh, dear. How did it do at award season?
It did well for itself. The film gathered 18 wins and 35 other nominations. 6 of those wins and 12 of those other nominations just were for Noomie and her performance in this film. She really was the character to note. Over in Sweden, their Academy Awards, the Guldbagge Awards, it won for Audience Award for Niels, Arden, Oplev. Best Actress, Noomie Rapace, and Best Film, Soren Starmos. It also was nominated for Best Cinematography by Erik Kress. He lost to Hoyt van Hoytema for The Girl, and supporting actor Sven Bertil Taub, who plays Henrik Vanger. He lost to Kjell Bergqvist for, let's see if I can say this, Bröllopsfotografen. Woo, baby. I can't wait to hear from our Swedish listeners about how I did on that one.
Oh, this is horrible. This is horrible. But I have to tell you, I'm very excited to introduce you to my alter ego, Soren Starmouse. That's my favorite name in the world. All of a sudden, I didn't. Who knew?
Soren Starmouse. Yeah, it's pretty great. It's like an animated superhero, right?
That's exactly what it is. Soren Starmouse.
Over at the Saturn Awards, the Academy of Motion Picture, or the Academy of Horror, Sci-Fi, and Fantasy, which I found it interesting that it was nominated because I guess under the horror vein, maybe, but it's not really fantasy or sci-fi. But Noomie was nominated for Best Actress, and it was nominated for Best International Film. Mm-hmm. Noomie lost to Natalie Portman for Black Swan, and the film lost to Monsters. So it did well for itself, considering the type of film that it is. It's I think largely it's not. It's a genre picture. I don't think it would normally get that much notice, but when you have such a strong performance as the foundation for your film, it's bound to get some recognition.
Now, we've been talking, obviously, a bunch about Fincher's remake in 2011, but this thing has been, let's just say, aggressively parodied.
Yes, especially because of the title, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. It just allows for such great parodies as The Dragon with the Girl Tattoo, or the
I'm sorry, that's funnier than it deserves.
It's quite funny. You also have The Girl with the Sturgeon Tattoo, The Girl Who Fixed the Umlaut, which is not quite as fun, The Girl with the Sandwich Tattoo, and The Coach with the Dragon Tattoo. So I don't know what any of those are, other than they are funny parody titles.
I'm looking at the pictures. The pictures of the dragon with the girl tattoo by Adam Roberts, and it's actually a dragon, and you're looking at his very well muscled back, and it has like the silhouette of, it's like the one of those silhouettes that are on truckers' mud flaps.
Yeah, right.
As a tattoo on its back. It's not elegant. It's worth a chuckle. It's worth a chuckle. All right.
Sometimes that's all you need.
Andy, let's run the numbers.
This film, for this adaptation, the first entry of the Millennium Trilogy, Oplev had an estimated budget of $13 million, or $14.5 million in today's dollars. In all of our conversation about him and what he was bringing to the table as far as a director here, we do have to note that we should compare what he had to work with what Fincher had to work with, which was $96.3 million in today's dollars. So for a 3-hour, ostensibly kind of a 2-part TV special, I think he did pretty good for himself compared to Fincher. The movie did open in Sweden and Denmark on February 27th, 2009, kicking off its massive global release before hitting the US on March 19th, 2010, in limited release opposite The Bounty Hunter, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and Repo Men. It continued its international rollout through January 2012, when it finally opened in South Korea. All told, the movie was a massive global success. In Sweden, the movie went on to make over 109 million Swedish krona, which is about 16.4 million in today's dollars. I couldn't find specifics as to the Swedish box office, but my understanding is that this topped it. Here in the US, the movie went on to make 12.7 million, and internationally it ended up making 96.7 million, giving it an overall gross of 109.4 million, or 122.5 million in today's dollars. This movie was more profitable at the box office than Fincher's remake 2, and did end up with an adjusted profit per finished minute of $706,000. All told, I'd say it's a great start for this trilogy.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens with these new properties, the new properties that are coming out from the new author, and to see how they're making out. What do we know about the remaining remakes of the American version? I know that Fincher and Zalian had signed on for the other two. Where are they?
I have heard everybody involved, whether it's Rooney Mara or Daniel Craig or David Fincher, saying that it wasn't going to happen. I don't know if they're still talking about it, but I think that it's one of those things where it's like these Swedish versions were, largely great films and very entertaining, and it didn't need to be remade in the first place. I mean, this is a foreign trilogy that my in-laws watched. I mean, that said to me everything about the not necessary fact that we needed an English version. That being said, last I heard that Fede Alvarez, who we actually talked about with Labyrinth last week, was announced as the new director as of November 2016. So it's been a little while. But I don't know if it's a full-on reboot of Girl Who Played with Fire, or if they're now just talking about rebooting the franchise with The Girl in the Spider's Web. So I'm not sure what direction they're going, other than the fact that, what is reported right now is Fede Alvarez directing The Girl in the Spider's Web is going to be released October 2018.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Claire Foy is signed on to play Lisbeth in The Girl in the Spider's Web, and obviously this is the next kind of the book. That is not the original part of the original trilogy. She's Queen Elizabeth in The Crown. She's a very popular and very talented, young actress. So I'm really interested to see if she can surprise us quite as well as Noomie or Rooney.
Yeah,
interesting.
I wonder if Noomie and Rooney ever got together.
I now that I've said those names back to back, it was hard to say those names back to back, but now that I've done it, I want to do it a lot.
I feel like this is a moment where we really need David Letterman at the Oscars. Noomie?
Yeah.
Rooney.
Noomie. I don't think I've ever...
Oprah.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
All right. Well, this was a great way to start this, at least our discussion of the trilogy as it stands, the Millennium Trilogy, and I hope I hope the other two movies stand just as well, Andy. I'm eager to talk about them.
It's a great trilogy. It's a great story. I think what I enjoy so much about it, having revisited it now, is watching Noomie Rapace play this character. She is just mesmerizing every time she's on screen. The overall mystery of the story itself obviously is no longer a surprise to me. It's, it doesn't bore me yet. And I think that is, again, like I said, just because it's so exciting to watch Lisbeth over the course of the story. And yes, it is very difficult to watch. There are some really hard scenes in here, but it's a solid film. I think that the team here did a great job with kicking off this trilogy.
I do too. I think it's time, Andy, for us to rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel, or you can just swipe over in your show notes and you can tap on the Flickchart button and that link, and that will take you right over to this film in Flickchart where you can add it to your list and see how it stacks up to ours. Andy?
All right. First off, we have The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, or Hot Fuzz.
I
have to say Hot Fuzz.
Do you? I was gonna say Girl with a Dragon Tattoo.
Oh, all right.
No, I know. I would regret that. I would definitely regret that. I can't do that. I'm gonna say
so. Hot Fuzz.
That's unfortunate.
Okay. It is.
I feel badly about that.
The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, or The Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
Definitely the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, or The Deer Hunter.
Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
I will, I'll agree with you on that one. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, or Big Fish. Dragon Tattoo for me. I know you're a big fish lover.
I'm such a big fish lover.
I know you are. It's okay.
I'm going to give it to you.
You don't have to feel bad about that.
I'm going to give it to you. Dragon Tattoo.
Oh, okay. All right. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, or The Bourne Supremacy.
Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Dragon Tattoo. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, or Star Trek First Contact.
Star Trek First
Dragon
Contact.
Tattoo.
Really?
Dragon Tattoo for me. If it was not First Contact, if it was one of the other ones, maybe.
I'm not firm on this. It's I think I answered out of reflex. So
I had more problems with First Contact this time.
Certainly many more than that's habit. Okay, I'll give you a Dragon Tattoo. Look at how weak I am.
I know.
Goodness.
The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, or Fat City.
Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, Andy.
I will say Dragon Tattoo
with a punch in the face.
Oh wow. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, or Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Oh.
I'm going to say Oh Brother.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Well, that puts The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. It made it almost back right up to the middle.
Yeah.
It's at 167 out of 328 on our chart. So I think that's a pretty fair spot for the trilogy to kick off. It just, started off against one of our tough ones. But again, we've talked about a lot of films that we love on the show.
Yes, we have. How did that stack up on your personal Flickchart rank?
It actually is pretty high. It's 344 out of 3884, which is about a 91%. So I think it's a pretty good spot. Definitely higher than the Fincher version. I am pretty happy with its position on my chart.
It actually rose right to the top for me, Andy, and I think unfairly. It ended up at 78 on my Flickchart out of 1,004 movies, which is too high. But it won against Family Guy, Blue Harvest.
As it should.
As it should. What if it had come up against the Star Wars Holiday Special? What would I have done? Anyway,
or the Ewoks.
That means on Letterboxd it should be a 4.5 star out of 5. It is not for me. I have it at a 4 star with a like, and that feels pretty good to me.
Yeah, mine is a 4 star and a like. That's where I sit with it also. So.
Oh well, aren't we twinsies?
We'll wear our twinsy jackets.
We will wear our twinsy jackets tomorrow. All right. Well, that puts us at the end of the first part. What is the second one? And do you ever get it confused with the third one? Because now the girl is just doing a lot of things.
Yeah, now she's all over the place.
Yeah.
With fire and hornets and spiders and eyes.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. In this particular case, she is playing with fire. We are going to be continuing the journey of Lisbeth Salander as we kind of go down this road of exploring more about her backstory, which is going to be exciting to see where we go with this one.
I am excited to do it too, and I think this is a great trilogy. I'm very excited that we're doing this. It feels like a long time coming. I think we talked about doing this in the first year of the podcast when we did the Fincher series, and so
I think you're right.
It really is about time.
Here we are.
Finally, Andy, when the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
Andy, what is it with people and reading their movies?
There are a lot of people who gave this a 1-star because they had to read their movie.
That is so dumb. I'm sorry. It is so dumb. This is terrible. And I think it's because we have been so spoiled culturally that because so much of the global film industry has for so long been Hollywood, that our exports are largely subtitled or dubbed or whatever. People around the world have grown up and adjusted to the fact that movies come in all shapes and sizes. Don't you think?
Yes, I think so.
And we are super spoiled.
We're the spoiled brats.
We are. This makes our fair country sound so petty and stupid. It's so stupid. I'm sorry. Please read your movies, people. They're great movies. This is becoming a trigger for me.
It really is. Yeah, there's like 16 pages of 1-star comments on the English subtitled version of this.
Yeah.
Most of those, I would say, are people complaining about subtitles.
Yeah, terrible. Would you like to start? Would you like me to start? How you feeling?
I'll kick it off.
All right.
Mine is by Stuart Topping. I'm going to read this in the as just straight up exactly as Stuart wrote it. So here we go. This worst film, rotten to the door. Shame on Amazon for have this available for kids to watch. I would give a -10 and Amazon a -20 for having this available. Set.
What?
There you go. It's almost like a secret code a little bit.
It is.
Rotten to the door, Pete. Rotten
to the door. I'm rotten to the door. Gotta hit the door running, Andy.
So I guess.
My trailer comes from Amazon customer, and given the I don't know, you read just a few lines of the back of the box or the description, and maybe this would be answered. The title is, I didn't realize it was all focused on violence towards women. I didn't realize this was all focused on violence towards women. If it had the original title from the book, I would never have watched it.
Oh my.
Oh, I'm sorry, customer. That's one that I think there are a lot of bad shoppers too.
Yeah, just button clickers. I get this.
Yeah, stop clicking, people. Step back away from the keyboard. Thanks, Amazon.
It's hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
I was so excited for our big Star Trek film franchise series this season. All those movies adapted from Gene Roddenberry's original 1960s TV show.
As a huge fan, I know that you geeked out over analyzing the adaptations.
Absolutely. From the motion picture to the Kelvin timeline films, seeing the Enterprise crews on the big screen was a dream come true.
Our list of source material isn't just all books and plays. We have the original series in our list of source material. You can rent the episodes to watch and enjoy and support the show in the process.
For our Millennium Trilogy series, we covered films adapted from the original books that launched Lisbeth Salander, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Girl Who Played with Fire, and The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest.
As much as I love Fincher's version, the original Swedish versions are the way to go. We also did our Die Hard series in season 7.
I can't believe Die Hard and Die Hard 2 were adaptations. 2 of the greatest action movies ever.
Well, one of them at least. The other is awfully fun, though. We revisited the classic Mary Poppins for our 1960s movie musical series. A spoonful of sugar always helps the medicine go down.
Old Boy was intense for our Park Chan-wook Vengeance trilogy, and East of Eden and Giant were highlights of our James Dean series.
And a fun time travel mind bender with Predestination to cap things off.
Find all the books behind these adaptations and more at thenextreel.com/originals.
Dive into the source material for your favorite movies. Check it out today, thenextreel.com/originals.